Welcome CSC 235 to part 2 of ex6-calc2, the one where we're doing the variable tip that we can put in the box here. And we're going to have to make two functions right now. And we're going to make a function that makes this number go down and a function that makes that number go up. So before our ctip function, we'll make another function. So I'll put some spaces here. And I'll call my first one function, and I'll just call it lower. And you could have done up or down or something. I'll just do it lower right now. And I'll put my two brackets so I have them in there. And I could even put I did this on my other one. You could even put a single line comment, and you could say functions that adjust tip percentage. At least you know that these two functions are the ones that do that. And they'll be very similar. They'll just have a very small change. So what we're going to do here for function lower is, and I'll indent this, we're basically going to take tip p, because we just generated the variable for tip p. So tip p is going to be equal to tip p minus 1. So it's going to take whatever tip is and then go down. That's minus 1. Now there is a shortcut to write this out, but for now I want you to understand how that works. There's a shortcut that you can do, minus equals, and that, or you can even do one that does minus minus. But for now, just so you understand how this works, we're taking tip p is the same as tip p minus 1. So we're resetting the variable. It's actually going to be 1 less. So that's how that works. And I'll put a semicolon. And now there's two things that have to happen. Not only do I make that number go down, that's the value that's being held. We also want the value that's being displayed to show. So now that we adjusted the value, we want to show it here. So showing the value is the one, and I'll put this right here. This is the one that displays the value, so I can copy this. So I don't have to write a whole bunch of new code. I'll just paste this right here. Now this is saying document get element by ID tip p, set the value to be tip p. Now you might say, well, why do we have to do that? Well, it wouldn't display unless we're doing it. This statement is making it display in that ID. So this ID now is making it redisplay, because originally it just had 15 in there. This kind of resets it. It tells it, okay, now we changed tip p. It's going to be 14 or 13 or right now. And then we're going to redisplay it again. So this just redisplays it. So that's what happens right now. So when we run a function, that's what's going to happen. So you could do these later, or you could do it now. That's going to be the function that's going to be inside here. That's going to be the lower, and make sure you put your parentheses here. We're not using parameters inside here, but we have to put the parentheses inside here. So that's going to be lower. That's going to run the lower function. Now I would try it out now, but we might have some other problems because of some older code that's in here right now. But that's what's going to happen first. We're going to run that one. So once we do that one, the second one is easy. The second one, you just copy it. And this one we'll call higher. And this will be plus. And like I said, there's shortcut code where you could do something. The shortcut code looks something like plus equals. And it always puts the sign first. I always get that confused, but it puts the sign first because the way I had it, just so you know, if I had equals plus, that would basically set tip p to be 1. It would be a positive 1, so I wouldn't want to do that. So I knew right away that you should always do the sign first and then the equals. And that's just kind of a weird shortcut that means this being a plus. So whether you use that or whether you use the long way, that's fine for now. If you're used to using shortcuts, then use the shortcuts. If you want to understand it, then do it the other way. So anyway, those are the two functions right now. And I'll put this one is higher. So that's the one that has the greater than sign. So I'm just going to put higher in there, and that should basically make that number go up or down. Let me save what I have, and I'll run the code. And I didn't get any errors. Let's just see if this works. That goes down, that goes up. It's working. So those things are working. I'm not getting any errors about any of the other functions. So that works. So what's going to happen next is whatever value's in there, we want to collect it, and then we want to kind of send it along. Now it's being collected as tip p. Now, one thing we could do here, and there's different ways to do this. We could have done this up higher when we had the first tip P, but I'm going to do it here because I think this will still work. What we're going to do is, now that we got values from tip P, we want to make sure they translate as a number and not as a string, because we had that issue before. So that's why we use that parse float down here for the meal. We have here parse float is built into that, or you could even do it after it. I'm going to do it after it right here. I'm just going to say tip P, because we already have these values of tip P. I'm just going to put tip P equals, so you're just kind of reassigning tip P, and I'll just put the parse float in here. So you could kind of join it all together, or you could do it after the fact. Here we're doing it after the fact. That just simplifies things as you're working, as you're kind of thinking things through. If you combine too many things early on, you might not know why you're doing it. But now we know that this has to translate as a number, so that's why we're doing the parse float. We're just running it on itself. We're saying, hey, tip P, make sure you make it a number. So now when tip P goes on, this should be a number when we use it in our ctip function, just like we did here. And the same thing I could do here. Here we have var meal equals parse float, and then it's running that in here. I could really do this, and I think we did on the previous one. I could really cut this, and I'll just cut it out of here, and I'll get rid of this parentheses here. I could have really said meal, and remember, you could just use meal. Once you declare the var, you could just use meal. Meal equals, and I could just say parse float meal. And that's kind of pulling it out and doing it after the fact. That's making sure that it translates. So that's the same thing I just did here. I could do that with meal, or you could put them all together and do them at one time. So that's really up to you, but I like to kind of break things out so you see what's happening. So this is sending it along as a number. So that's why this thing says converts from string to number. We're doing it separately, but both statements are doing that. So what this is doing, just as we look at our ctip function here, var meal, and this is from the other one. Remember, that is just getting the value. That's declaring a variable of what somebody puts in here. So if someone puts 100 in here or 50, it's basically saying that's going to get sent along with a variable, because the data will be held as meal. Not the ID, we already have an ID, but the value that's in there will be held as meal, and meal will have to get multiplied, to figure out the tip amount and also to figure out the final charge. Okay, so I think we're okay so far. So we're going to we now have tip P parse floated as a number, meal is parse floated as a number, so that should be okay. And now here's something that this should be okay, because we have it after we have that value. I had an issue earlier where I had this value outside of the function, and what happened, it wasn't being translated as a number even by doing that, and that's because it was taking the original value, which was nothing, before the function was run. So I'll show you that later, but by keeping it in this function, it should help send it along once we click the button. There should be a value in there once you hit the ctip button. So moving along here, we shouldn't have that much to do. We're still going to say var tip. Now this is still called tip. Remember, this is tip P for percentage. This is just var tip. And what that's going to do, that's going to be meal times. And instead of 0.15, we're not going to be, that's when we had just a single number. We're going to multiply this by tip P, because that tip P is now whatever value this happens to be. It could be anything. It could be even negative numbers, but whatever tip P is. So it's still going to be the same thing. Tip is basically going to be meal times tip P, and these should have already translated as numbers. And if they don't, or if you have problems with that, I'll show you there's a way you could kind of check it. But for now, we'll keep moving along. So that should be our calculation. That, let's see, meal times that should give us our tip amount, which is just called tip. And then we also want to display it in there. So we have document.get element by ID tip value equals, it's going to be tip, but then we're going to put two zeros on it, or 2 decimal places on it. So that's okay. And then var total bill, I think I called this total in my last one. I tried to keep it consistent. So let me get rid of bill out of there, and I'll just keep everything total. I think the first version I called it total bill. So I'll keep everything total. That way the IDs are the same as the variables. So let's just keep going along here and seeing if this works out. We have total, which is this box, and is basically the meal plus tip. So we're taking the meal again, whatever the original meal was, and then we're adding it to the tip, which is this here. So hopefully the tip is getting translated as a number, or it should be, but we'll see if it is. And then this last statement, which we don't have to rewrite, that just displays it. See, this is to display it. This basically adds it up. It gets the value. It gets the, the number. It holds the value or the data, and this is the one that puts it in this box, and it puts 2 decimal places after it. So that looks like it should be okay so far. Now, one thing I don't have yet is I don't have a c-tip in here, so I have my third function called c-tip, and I'll put that in there with my parentheses, and I'll just I'll save what I have, and I'll run my code. I don't have any errors yet, and I'll just see what happens, and I'll put in a number. I always put in 100 because that way the numbers work out, and I won't change anything first. I'll just do c-tip, and it's saying 1500, 1600. So we have a problem there because it's too much, because you know what's happening. It's saying 100 times 15. So we're going to have to make sure that we convert it to a percentage. So we have one little conversion to do. That I see as a problem. Let me just see if this works if we change it down. And it's working. The only problem is our number is too big because we have to change our decimal places here, because percentage wouldn't be 13. Percentage would actually be 0.13. So we're actually going to have to multiply that by 0.10. And that's fairly easy to do. And there's a couple different ways we can do this. We could go right in here when we figure out the tip, and we could multiply it by 0.01. We could do that. It should just go in order and multiply that. So that's one way to do it. And let me just see if it works. I'll save update. I'll run my code, and I'll put in 100 and see if that fixes it. And 15, that's 15%. So that works. That's one way to work. We could have probably broken it out, and just to try it out, you could see, if you don't want it in there, you could put it after it. You could just say, okay, tip equals tip times 0.01. You could just kind of reset it right after. We did it all together, or you could do it right after and see if that works. So I'll run the code, and I'll try that, and I'll go down, and I'll see tip, and that's $12. And see, we can go up here and do c-tip, and we can go down and c-tip. So everything seems to be working. So I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's anything else we have to do. Let me just look at my other code here. We have our 3 functions working. Everything looks okay. Everything looks okay as far as what we have, and I think we're okay. So it's just kind of working things out. And if you have any problems, let me know. We're going to do a little more with this, because one thing I do want to address is that what if you don't put anything in? And then you get that. NaN means not a number, because it's taking this value, which is nothing, and trying to figure it in there. So what we're also going to do is use a if-else conditional statement and make sure that someone has to have a number in there, or else we'll do a little alert. So I'll do that as part 3, and maybe I'll do that as another exercise. But you can do this first and send it along, and then as our another one, since it's a little more involved, we'll do an if-else statement as we'll call it ex. Maybe that'll be ex7. I'm not sure what it'll be, but we'll do that next. So we'll build on this just a little bit more after this.